Hello, look at this wall. Notice how, except for the location with commanding views overlooking nearby valleys and mountains, it is unimposing. Nevertheless, the wall has the elegant cyclopean style of construction with odd-shaped stones fitting one to the other that we know is the trademark of ancient genius. So much so, not only do we today think highly of the works, classical Greek authors also recognize the Cyclopean builders' exceptional skill, even speculating over additional tricks up their sleeves, beyond the ability to make puzzles of bent stone. In fact, according to ancient sources, the Cyclopean builders mastered other impossible technologies, such as the ability to send messages at the speed of light, doing that within the walls we are visiting today. Today's wall is not one building alone, but a bunch of them, scattered all over the landscape of Greece and beyond. Individually, they are unimpressive and thus, generally speaking, overlooked. They are too small to be a castle or to have any practical use for that matter. Have no sort of a floor plan, no doors, no windows, maybe for being too damaged. Are located in hard-to-reach places, leaving them not to be studied or even registered in maps. And obviously, they were built in the Cyclopean fashion, with a puzzle of weirdly shaped stones. That sadly means being underappreciated by some. These small buildings are named Phryctories and are to be found in places usually called agios something. The name agios whatever is simple to explain. Agios just means saint in Greek and is referring to the title sponsor of a particular chapel that was built on the site of the older Phryctories. Now, the freaky thing name is less clear. Phryctoria might have derived from fire or message and means beacon. But that is a later naming that, as we'll see, bears little relation to the original motivation to build these little wonders. Picture this. The war of Troy is over, and the long-awaited news travels faster than any messenger ever could. At lightning speed, the people back in Mycenae are informed of the success of the campaign and the return of their soldiers. The happy news traveled almost instantaneously, thanks to a feat of engineering that had towers built all the way from Troy into the capital of the Achaeans. Each tower located precisely at the point that one could see the next one. In each of these towers, those now called Victoria, a celebration fire was put up, relaying the good news with just a glimpse of flames over the horizon. This would be quite a moment. We can almost see the fires in the beacons breaking the night at a distance and imagine the celebrations erupting in the streets. But then, as with most everything from the War of Troy, it is just pure baloney. Not in the sense that the War of Troy never happened, and that the protagonists are all made up, and even most of the events are silly. That much any person with common sense, even back in the days of Homer, would be aware, knowing the Iliad is just the Game of Thrones of that generation. The problem here is that the method used for communication, i.e., the fires in the freaking Cyclopean towers, is more out there than believing the Trojans would carry a half-assed horse sculpture inside their walls and leave it unguarded for the night. See, the War of Troy lasted, as the story goes, 20 years, and it is weird to think the Phryctoria towers could have been standing there idle for 2 decades, just to be used once and then discarded, implying building many towers with fancy polygonal walls atop steep mountains across continents and staffing them continuously, just in case tonight is the night the Trojans finally get dumb. Naturally, these stories, as all in the War of Troy, are fake, myths with gods and whatnot, something the audiences knew, sometimes from personal experience. For example, in 1490 BC, a soldier died at the gates of Athens, murmuring the words, "We won." Exhausted not from running 42 kilometers after the Battle of Marathon, but actually 290 kilometers, going back and forth from Sparta, trying to enlist the brutish neighbors against the incoming Persians. So, if the Mycenaean had mastered the fire beacon messaging over the towers, why did that soldier of Marathon had to die after running a triple Ironman on sandals? The answer is that the tale of the Phryctories is just fan fiction, and the towers were never used to convey clear messages. This relaying of messages as we do today over the internet to spread conspiracy theories is a new invention, starting with the telegraph and Morse code in the late 19th century. Before that, there was just one success with fast communication. Only a few decades earlier, the Napoleonic army came up with the first practical system of semaphore, using pivoting arms with flags in posts to spread messages from one point to the other. That system proved effective and was replicated into ships with a similar language applied to the waving of flags, making it the first time someone came up with a way to communicate faster than going there and telling the stuff yourself. True, fire beacons, the replacement of a visible string of fireplaces along a line, are not a new idea. Over the centuries, many kings and generals tried to make use of them. But if we look closely, we might find out a pattern of disappointment. Indian tribes and other arguably primitive folks are known to use smoke signals to communicate, but that was always limited to one-off warnings, like coordinating a raid, and would not be reusable, as illustrated by the telegraph replacing the Pony Express and not some smoked network. Emperor Constantine VII built a line of beacons to warn him of an attack by the Arabs. Those towers were destroyed after a surprise attack by, who else, the Arabs. Earlier, some classical Greek scholar came up with a complex hydraulic system with a theoretical speed of 150 letters per hour, meaning this video would take about 12 years just to spell. Naturally, no one used it, and it became yet another Greek impractical idea, like democracy. And before that, there is the story of the War of Troy and the Phryctories being all made up, because the true history of fire beacons communication is just a tale of failure. No one could make it work. There are other small cyclopean buildings in the area. These are not unlike the Phryctoria towers, but that are not included in the same club, for no good reason really. These other little cyclopean buildings are also scattered around the Greek landscape, mostly to the south. Their usage is also unclear. They have a lack of windows and obviously have been built with proper cyclopean masonry. There are about 15 of them still visible, and I made a video about it. That is funny, and you will like it, like you are liking this one now. Yes, like it, now. Moving on, these other mini cyclopean things are a bit more diverse, and that is why they are not dumped in the same bunch as the beacons or Phryctories. For example, they are sometimes shaped like houses or even pyramids and not as towers. The location is often not on top of a hill, thus defeating the idea of it being a beacon. And also, most of them are said to be too young, from the 5th century BC, way ahead of the mythical War of Troy, around the 12th century BC. This younger dating is, as in most cyclopean cases, just ridiculous. Not only do, let's say, baby cyclops use the same type of stonework as the walls in Mycenae, the most prominent of them all, the Pyramid of Hellenikon, had been studied and dated via thermoluminescence to be from around the 20th century BC. That's old, ahead of time, to be as old as the oldest Mycenaean walls. Leading me to think the obvious, that the baby cyclops and the freaky towers are related to one another. There are hundreds of cyclopean walls, ranging from the monumental to the exquisite, all the way from Portugal to Armenia. The mainstream denies there is any relation between the builders of these cyclopean constructions, implying that having full populations building in a particular way during a limited amount of time across a single geographic area is but a coincidence, when in reality the cyclopean builders of Europe were a family of cultures with more ties to one another than just their building style. For example, the towers, little windowless buildings that we have no idea what they were made for, and make up for the biggest number of such culturally relevant constructions. Not only the Phryctories in Greece plus the other baby cyclops, as in the pyramid that we've been following, also the Nuragic towers in Sardinia, with an astounding 9,000 of them still visible, setting the standard for everything cyclopean. Because the cyclopean cultures went extinct at the end of the Bronze Age, except for Sardinia, where the local identity stood until the Romans arrived, half a millennium later, thus giving us the only historical glimpse into what being a cyclopean builder in Bronze Age Europe meant. In Andalusia, in the Iberian Peninsula, a handful of equivalent towers made another testament to this same pattern of cyclopean builders spreading towers over the territory without a clear usage, rather than being there to look at. Even reaching outside the cyclopean cluster. In Scotland, the Brochs are eerily similar to the Nuragis of Sardinia, and they may, or not, be related to the cultures bordering the Mediterranean. In all these cases, we can only speculate what they meant, but I'm pretty sure that replaying the news was not the message. Confused yet? Just don't listen to them. Ancient sources were like academics today. They made up most things out of hearsay. Not that they were stupid, it is just that, due to scarce information, the deep past is impossible to know. Thus, ancient authors filled in the blanks with tales of the supernatural, as academics do today with arrogance, trying to hide all they have are opinions. Classical Greek writers imagined the towers were used as a communication device by a centralized empire. Then, maybe realizing fire beacon systems never worked, these same authors could have speculated that if the cyclopean builders were able to make 3D stone puzzles, they might as well find a way to crack the instant messaging code. Don't take me wrong. Likewise, classical Greeks, I do think that if anyone could ever make fire beacons work as a proper messaging system, the cyclopean builders would be the ones. But they didn't. If we look at the stones alone and ignore the noise made by the experts, it becomes apparent that the Phryctories are not unlike all the other cyclopean towers, and even the Agio whatever chapels replacing them. In short, I say cyclopean towers are a beacon, not for any centralized message passing by, but for local pride. They represent a technologically advanced tribal culture, a mix quite rare in the course of history. Here's the thing. The Cyclopean towers were not a fire beacon or a semaphore, nothing so practical. They were a political statement, a manifestation of the builder's cultural pride, affirming a unique mix of sophistication and independence. That is what the stones reveal, confirmed with other Cyclopean towers all over the Mediterranean coast, plus the fact that fire beacons are one of those ideas that seem to make sense at first, and many people think of it, but in reality have limitations. Sure, it would be awesome if the Cyclopean builders, on top of bending stones, could have invented messaging at the speed of light, but they didn't. Thus, the towers were built to express themselves and not to spread someone else's ideas. As for the reason those Phryctorious places end up with the name of Saint whatever, well, that is yet another way of saying Cyclopean walls were built by the gods, as we'll see next. That's it for today. Hope you liked it. Drop an eye in the comments.